The first warning reached the palace as a whisper of static. Queen Elyra stood beneath the transparent dome of the Western Observatory, watching 3 pale moons drift above the capital, when every star beyond them suddenly disappeared. For one impossible second, the sky became a sheet of polished black glass. Then the darkness split open. Enemy vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. They were long, narrow ships with serrated hulls, their engines burning a cold crimson that reflected across the silver towers of the city. No declaration arrived. No demand followed. The leading cruiser fired before the palace alarms had even finished recognizing the threat. The orbital defense ring vanished in white fire. The explosion was so bright that Elyra saw the bones of her own hand through her skin as she raised it against the glare. A heartbeat later, the observatory shook. The floor tilted. Crystal panels cracked above her, and one of her guards dragged her backward as burning fragments rained across the chamber. "Your Majesty, we must move." "I noticed," Elyra replied, forcing steadiness into her voice. "The ceiling has become unusually persuasive." The guard almost laughed. Almost. Elyra gathered the torn edge of her ceremonial cloak and followed the emergency lights into the lower command level. Her long ears lay flat against her silver-blonde hair, a reaction she hated because every officer in the room could read her fear before she spoke. Alien faces turned toward her as she entered. Some were streaked with blood. Others glowed blue beneath emergency lamps. All of them waited for their queen to make the universe sensible again. It refused to cooperate. Reports flooded the holographic table. Defense satellites destroyed. Northern shield generators offline. Communications with the lunar stations lost. Enemy drones descending over the eastern districts. General Varos slammed both hands onto the table. This attack was prepared months in advance. "An inspiring observation," said a quiet voice near the rear wall. "Do we also know whether the explosions are hostile?" Several officers turned. The speaker was the human soldier. Daniel Cross stood beside a damaged sensor column, dressed in the dark field uniform of Earth's Expeditionary Corps. He looked ordinary compared with the armored giants surrounding him. No glowing eyes. No ceremonial blades, no visible cybernetics. Just a tired face, short dark hair, and the calm expression of a man waiting for someone to finish explaining a problem he had already begun solving. General Varos narrowed his 4 golden eyes. "This is not the time for human humor." Daniel glanced toward the ceiling as another impact rolled through the palace. "I agree. The timing is terrible." A few technicians lowered their heads to hide smiles. Elyra studied him. Humans had been present on her world for only 6 months, officially as military observers and technical advisors. Their ships were compact, inelegant, and suspiciously difficult to scan. Their weapons were described as defensive, though no one had been permitted to examine them closely. Daniel himself rarely spoke about Earth technology. Whenever questioned, he changed the subject or made a joke about paperwork. Now he watched the tactical display with unsettling focus. "Can your people assist us?" Elyra asked. Daniel's gaze shifted to her. "Yes." The answer came too quickly. General Varos scoffed. "With what? Your transport is in orbit." "Was in orbit," Daniel corrected. "It stopped answering 12 minutes ago." The room went silent. Elyra saw no grief in his face, but something colder had entered his eyes. A technician called from the missile network console. "Your Majesty, the automated launch grid is not responding. Reroute through the southern relay. It is gone. Then use the palace command system. Also gone." The central display changed, showing a map of the capital. Red symbols spread across it like spilled blood. Beneath the city, one green icon remained active: the Planetary Missile Reserve. Elyra leaned closer. One weapon? One, the technician confirmed. Vault 7 survived the attack. General Varos exhaled in relief. Then launch it immediately. The technician did not move. What is it? Elyra asked. The missile is intact, but the magnetic transport rails collapsed. The launcher is 3 kilometers away. Varos stared at the display. Activate the anti-gravity carriers. Destroyed. Cargo walkers? Destroyed. Engineering crawlers? The technician swallowed. Also destroyed. The green icon continued blinking below the city, alive and useless. How heavy is it? Daniel asked. No one answered him at first. The technician finally looked over. 940 metric tons. Daniel nodded once. General Varos gave a bitter laugh. Do humans solve such problems by staring at them? Sometimes, Daniel said. Other times we make the problem regret being heavy. Elyra turned fully toward him. Daniel stepped closer to the holographic table. Beneath the fabric of his uniform, something moved along his spine. It was subtle, almost like a mechanical ripple beneath flesh. Thin lines of silver light appeared briefly at the base of his neck, then vanished. The Queen froze. She had seen advanced prosthetics, neural armor, even warriors grown inside synthetic bodies. This was different. The machine did not seem attached to Daniel. It seemed to be part of him. Outside, another section of the city shield failed, and the command room filled with red light. Daniel looked at the blinking missile icon. Show me the vault, he said. Vault 7 lay beneath the oldest quarter of the capital, buried under layers of black alloy, volcanic stone, and defensive systems designed during a war no living officer remembered. The route downward should have taken 6 minutes by gravlift. With the power grid failing, it took 23. Queen Elyra descended with Daniel, General Varos, 2 engineers, and a squad of palace guards through a service shaft lit only by emergency strips. Each red light came alive a moment before they reached it and died behind them, making the narrow passage feel as though the darkness itself were following. Above, the city trembled under distant bombardment. Dust slipped from the ceiling. One of the guards glanced upward. Is that structurally normal? Daniel looked at the cracks spreading through the stone. On Earth, we call that a building expressing concern. The guard stared at him. It usually expresses itself shortly before collapsing. That was not reassuring. It was not intended to be. Even Elyra felt the corner of her mouth lift, though the amusement vanished when another impact shook the shaft hard enough to throw them against the wall. Somewhere far below, ancient mechanisms groaned awake. The final blast door opened reluctantly, dragging itself into the floor with a scream of metal. Vault 7 was enormous. Its ceiling disappeared into shadow, supported by pillars thicker than palace towers. Rows of dormant maintenance drones hung from rails overhead, their limbs folded like the legs of sleeping insects. At the center of the chamber rested the last planetary missile. It did not resemble the elegant weapons displayed in royal museums. It was brutal, cylindrical, and nearly 80 meters long, wrapped in armored plating marked with warning symbols that pulsed orange in the darkness. 4 stabilizing fins were locked against its body. Beneath it, the magnetic transport platform had collapsed into a twisted trench of burned machinery. Elyra stopped at the edge of the chamber. The weapon looked less like something built to fly and more like a fallen monument. Engineer Talren rushed to the nearest control station and pressed both hands against the interface. Blue holograms flickered, broke apart, and reformed. The warhead is stable, he said. Guidance core functional. Propulsion cells at 91%. And the transport system? Varos asked. Talren gestured toward the molten rails. Unless the general has learned to command liquid metal, It remains unavailable. Varos gave him a cold look. Talren lowered his eyes. I apologize. Do not, Daniel said. That was almost funny. The engineer blinked, uncertain whether he had been complimented. Elyra walked closer to the missile. Its surface reflected her pale face and long ears in distorted strips. Can it be disassembled? No, Talren replied. The containment shell was sealed at manufacture. Opening it would destabilize the fusion lattice. Can we move the launcher here? The launcher weighs twice as much. General Varos paced beside the ruined platform. Then we gather labor teams. Soldiers, civilians, construction machines. Anything that can pull. Talren shook his head. The missile cannot be dragged. Damage to the lower magnetic coils would make launch impossible. How many anti-gravity units remain in the city? None with sufficient capacity. Varos struck the side of the control console. There must be another solution. There is, Daniel said. His voice carried across the vault. Everyone turned. The human had walked beneath the missile's forward section. He stood beside one of the support cradles, studying the gap between the weapon and the floor. Silver lines had reappeared along his neck. This time, they did not vanish. They spread beneath his skin in branching patterns, descending under his collar and along both arms. Elyra felt an instinctive unease. What are you doing? She asked. Measuring. With your eyes? Mostly. Varos laughed once, sharply. You intend to lift it. Daniel looked at him. That was the general idea. For a moment, no one spoke. Then several officers began talking at once. It is 940 tons. The support frame alone. A human spine would shatter instantly. The floor may not withstand the pressure. Daniel raised a hand. Those are all excellent concerns. I recommend worrying about them in an orderly fashion. Elyra approached him slowly. Up close, she could hear a faint vibration beneath his uniform, like distant machinery coming online. What exactly are you? She asked. Daniel's expression changed, not with anger, but with caution. Human. That is not what I meant. I know. He pulled back the sleeve of his uniform. At first, his arm appeared normal. Then the skin along his forearm separated in thin, precise lines. Dark, metallic structures unfolded beneath it, not replacing muscle and bone, but woven through them. Microscopic plates shifted over living tissue. Threads of pale energy pulsed between artificial tendons. The mechanism moved with the smoothness of something that had grown rather than been built. Engineer Talren took one involuntary step backward. Varos whispered, "That technology is forbidden in 12 sectors." Daniel examined his arm. Only 12? Elyra did not laugh. Earth fused this machine into you? Earth gave me a choice. And you accepted? His gaze returned to the missile. At the time, it seemed better than dying. The casual words carried a weight he did not explain. A warning tone echoed through the vault. A tactical projection appeared above the control station, showing the enemy fleet closing around the planet. Talren's face paled. The flagship will enter firing range in 2 hours. Daniel rolled his shoulders. Beneath his skin, the exoskeleton answered with a deep, mechanical click. Then we should stop discussing my poor life decisions. He crouched beside the missile's support cradle and placed both hands beneath the armored frame. General Varos stared at him. Where exactly do you expect to carry it? Daniel looked toward the far blast doors. To the launcher. The general's 4 eyes widened. Daniel smiled faintly. Someone should probably open the door first. Daniel did not lift the missile immediately. He remained crouched beneath its armored frame while the vault hummed around him, his hands pressed against metal cold enough to burn exposed skin. The silver lines beneath his arms brightened, spreading over his shoulders and disappearing beneath his uniform. Tiny mechanical clicks passed through his body one after another, too precise to be bones and too organic to be ordinary machinery. Engineer Talren moved closer despite his fear, holding a scanner toward Daniel's spine. The device filled with impossible readings. "Your skeletal density is increasing," he whispered. "Artificial fibers are wrapping around your muscles. There are gravitational distortions inside your chest." Daniel glanced sideways. That last one might be breakfast. Talren looked horrified. "You consumed a gravitational distortion?" "No. That was a joke. Humans should label those." Queen Elyra stood several steps away, watching the transformation with growing unease. She had expected hidden armor, perhaps a compact power frame beneath his clothing. What she saw was something far more intimate. The machine moved through Daniel as blood moved through veins. Dark plates formed briefly beneath his skin, overlapping along his ribs before sinking back into him. At the base of his neck, a small circular port opened and released a thread of white vapor. "How much of you is still biological?" she asked. Daniel's smile faded. "Enough. That is not an answer. It is the only one I give." General Varos stepped between them, his 4 golden eyes fixed on the missile. "This spectacle is wasting time. Either the human can move it, or he cannot." Daniel slowly rose from beneath the support frame. "I can move it. You have not even tested the load. I tested heavier loads on Mars." Varos folded his arms. "Mars has lower gravity." "Yes, Mars also had people shooting at me." The general opened his mouth, then closed it again. Daniel walked along the missile, examining the damaged cradles and the fractured rails. He asked Talren for the weapon's structural stress limits, center of mass, and magnetic coil placement. The engineer projected a translucent model into the air. Bands of red and green surrounded the weapon, showing where pressure could safely be applied. Daniel studied it in silence. Elyra noticed that his humor vanished whenever numbers appeared. His eyes tracked every measurement with cold concentration, and for the first time she understood that the jokes were not carelessness. They were armor of another kind. "The floor will crack if the entire weight rests beneath his feet," Talren warned. "Then we distribute it," Daniel said. He tapped the side of his neck. The circular port opened again, and 6 metallic objects no larger than coins slipped from beneath his collar. They floated around him, unfolded into angular drones, and descended toward the floor. Pale blue fields spread between them, forming a web of distorted air. Talren's scanner began shrieking. "Localized inertia anchors," he said. "Those do not exist." Daniel looked at the hovering machines. "They're sensitive. Try not to hurt their feelings." The anchors settled around the missile, each one projecting a faint column of light into the stone. Dust rose from the ground and hung motionless, suspended in invisible force. Elyra walked toward the nearest device. "These machines can reduce the weapon's weight?" "Not exactly. They spread the pressure through the surrounding structure." "Through how much structure?" "About half the district." Varos stared at him. "You are attaching the missile to the city?" "Temporarily. And if your calculations are wrong?" Daniel considered the question. "The district becomes shorter." Talren made a choking sound. Elyra closed her eyes for one brief second. "Is that also humor?" "Mostly." The vault lights flickered. A new alarm rolled across the chamber, deeper than the previous warnings. The tactical projection above the console showed dozens of red points breaking away from the enemy fleet and descending through the atmosphere. "Assault craft," Varos said. "They know the missile survived." Talren enlarged the map. Estimated arrival at this sector, 28 minutes. The Queen's guards immediately raised their weapons. Elyra looked from the descending craft to Daniel. Can you be ready before they reach us? He stepped beneath the missile again. I can be ready now. The support cradle groaned as he positioned himself under the weapon's reinforced spine. He placed one shoulder against the lower armor and spread both hands beneath the frame. The exoskeleton responded. Metallic ridges rose along his back, tearing through the outer layer of his uniform. Black support struts unfolded from his shoulders and locked against the missile with heavy magnetic impacts. His breathing slowed. Every light in the vault dimmed as his internal reactor drew power. Talren stared at the energy readings. This output could power the palace. Daniel grunted. Then someone should send the palace my bill. Elyra moved closer despite Varos's attempt to stop her. Daniel's face had gone pale. Thin veins of silver light pulsed across his temples. You do not have to prove anything to us, she said quietly. He looked at her from beneath the immense weapon. I'm not proving anything. Then why do this? Above them, another impact shook dust from the ceiling. Daniel's expression became still. Because your people are under that sky. The simplicity of the answer silenced her. He bent his knees. The inertia anchors flared. The floor trembled, not violently, but deeply, as though the entire city had taken a breath. Metal screamed through the chamber. One of the ancient support cradles buckled outward. Slowly, impossibly, a narrow shadow appeared beneath the missile. Talren stepped backward. Varos's 4 eyes widened. The guards forgot to raise their weapons. Daniel lifted again, and the 940-ton weapon rose another centimeter. Then another. The vault groaned around him as the massive missile left its cradle for the first time in 2 centuries. Daniel's boots sank into the stone, but he did not stop. When the weapon finally settled across the black supports on his shoulders, he stood beneath it, shaking but upright. Queen Elyra froze, her long ears pressed flat against her hair, unable to speak. Daniel turned his head toward the still-closed blast doors. I mentioned the door, he said through clenched teeth. This would be an excellent time to remember it. The blast doors began to open with the speed of an elderly machine reconsidering every decision it had made since manufacture. Their locking teeth withdrew one by one, each movement followed by a grinding protest that echoed through the vault. Daniel stood beneath the missile while the enormous weapon rested across the black supports rising from his shoulders. His knees trembled. Stone cracked beneath his boots. The inertia anchors pulsed around him, casting pale waves through the dust. Yet his voice remained dry when he said, I assume faster doors were removed for budget reasons. Talren struck the control panel with both hands. They were built to survive a planetary siege. They are currently losing an argument with urgency. Queen Elyra moved beside the engineer. Override the safety cycle. If I do that, the motors may burn out. Daniel exhaled through clenched teeth. Engineer, I am carrying a missile large enough to frighten geography. Burn the motors. Talren entered the command. The doors shuddered, then tore apart their own locking sequence with a scream of tortured alloy. A gap opened wide enough for Daniel to pass. Beyond it stretched the underground transit corridor leading toward the surface launcher, 3 kilometers away through the damaged foundations of the capital. General Varos ordered the guards forward. Clear the route. No one walks beneath the weapon. Daniel took his first step. The entire vault answered. A deep vibration rolled through the floor as the missile shifted with him. The inertia anchors glided ahead, distributing the crushing pressure through walls, pillars, and buried support veins. Holographic warning symbols appeared around Daniel, showing stress levels climbing toward red. He adjusted his stance by a fraction and the weapon steadied. Elyra watched him cross the threshold. There was nothing graceful about it. Every step looked deliberate, brutal, and impossibly controlled. The silver lines in his face glowed brighter. Small vents opened along his back, releasing white vapor that curled around the missile's underside. Talren hurried beside the Queen, staring at his scanner. His internal temperature is rising. How quickly? Too quickly. Daniel heard him. I preferred the part where everyone was impressed. We remain impressed, Elyra said. We are also concerned. That is the usual reaction. The corridor lights awakened ahead of them in sections. Ancient murals lined the walls, depicting long-dead queens standing beside starships shaped like wings. Daniel passed beneath them carrying a weapon none of those rulers had imagined one body could move. Then the first support beam collapsed. A fractured pillar dropped from the ceiling directly into the root. Guards shouted and scattered. Daniel could not. He twisted beneath the missile. The movement was small, but the inertia fields bent around him. The falling beam struck the weapon's armored side, shattered into fragments, and scattered across the corridor. Daniel staggered once. The missile tilted. Elyra's breath stopped. Black support struts snapped outward from Daniel's spine and locked against the weapon with magnetic force. His right foot drove through the stone floor to the ankle, but he recovered before the missile could slide. He looked toward the guards. Everyone alive? A soldier raised a trembling hand. Yes. Good. I would hate to fill out an accident report. Varos stared at the shattered beam. You nearly died. Daniel pulled his foot free from the stone. That would have made the report longer. Even the general's mouth twitched. They continued. Halfway through the corridor, the tactical map projected from Talren's wrist changed. Red symbols descended rapidly over the district. Enemy assault craft had entered the lower atmosphere. Their hulls released clusters of drilling drones designed to penetrate bunkers and missile chambers. They will reach the surface above us in 11 minutes, Talren said. Varos turned to his troops. Establish defensive positions at the western junction. Elyra studied the map. The junction is too narrow. If they breach it, Daniel will have nowhere to maneuver. I do not require room, Daniel said. You require enough room to remain alive. That sounds luxurious. The Queen stepped in front of him, forcing him to stop. Up close, she saw blood running from one of his nostrils. The silver veins at his temples pulsed with each heartbeat. You are damaging yourself. The suit is compensating. The suit is consuming you. His eyes met hers. For once he offered no joke. A violent impact shook the corridor. Dust poured from the ceiling. Somewhere above, alien weapons began firing in rapid bursts. Daniel looked past her toward the long ascent ahead. Your Majesty, the missile does not need me healthy. It needs me moving. And when your body fails, then your engineers should avoid standing underneath. Elyra's long ears lowered in anger. You treat death as though it is an inconvenience. No, he said quietly. I treat fear that way. The answer remained between them for only a moment, before another explosion rolled through the passage. Daniel resumed walking. The corridor climbed toward the surface in a steep curve. With every step, the missile seemed heavier. The inertia anchors flickered under interference from the enemy bombardment. One drone failed and dropped to the floor, smoking. Talren shouted, Field distribution has fallen by 17%. Different culture. Palace guards spread across the ruined square, firing toward the descending craft. Their blue energy bolts struck its shields and dissolved into ripples of light. The machine banked low between the towers, its serrated wings scraping sparks from a damaged bridge. General Varos shouted orders from behind an overturned transport. Concentrate fire on the forward emitters. Daniel could not raise a weapon. Both hands remained locked against the missile's support frame. Yet the metallic structures woven through his body reacted to the threat. A plate opened along his left shoulder, and a compact turret unfolded beside his neck. Elyra stared. You have a cannon inside you. Technically, it is outside me now. The turret fired. A narrow white beam crossed the plaza and pierced the enemy craft's shield as though it were thin ice. The vessel spun sideways, clipped the edge of a tower, and vanished into the street beyond in a blooming sphere of fire. For several seconds, even the alien soldiers stopped shooting. Daniel continued walking. Please admire responsibly. We are still under attack. 3 more craft descended through the smoke. Their lower hatches opened, releasing black drones with curved limbs and glowing red sensors. They struck the ground around the convoy like metal insects, embedding claws into the pavement before leaping toward Daniel. Elyra fired first. Her pulse rifle cut one drone in half. Varos destroyed another, while the guards formed a moving wall beside the missile. The remaining machines were too fast. One sprang over the defenders and landed on the missile's armored casing. Daniel's face tightened. Is that dangerous? Elyra asked. It is carrying a shaped charge. So yes. Moderately. The drone crawled toward the guidance section. Daniel could not shake it loose without risking the weapon. Elyra ran alongside him, jumped onto a broken section of wall, and caught the edge of the missile's lower plating. Her long ears flattened in the rushing heat as she pulled herself upward. Your Majesty, Varos shouted. I can hear you disapproving, General. That is because I am shouting. She climbed onto the missile while Daniel moved beneath it. The height gave her a clear view of the burning capital. Towers leaned over shattered streets. Defense drones fought between columns of smoke. Above everything, the enemy flagship hung in the clouds like a dark continent. The crawling machine turned toward her. Its red eye narrowed. Elyra fired, but the drone twisted aside. Its bladed limb struck the rifle from her hands. She dropped to one knee as it lunged. A silver cable shot from Daniel's shoulder and wrapped around the drone's body. He ripped it backward, tearing it from the missile and slamming it into the ground. The explosion followed immediately. The blast struck Daniel from the side. One inertia anchor shattered. The missile tilted sharply and Elyra slid across its smooth armor toward the edge. Daniel shifted beneath the full weight. The sound that escaped him was not a shout, but a low, broken breath. Metallic supports drove deeper into his shoulders. Blood spread through the torn fabric of his uniform. Elyra caught a seam in the plating before she fell. Daniel. I'm fine. You are bleeding. I've had worse uniforms. Talren checked his scanner while running beside them. Load distribution has dropped to 63%. His spinal reinforcement is overheating. Daniel forced another step. The launch platform stood beyond the plaza, visible between 2 collapsed towers. Its vertical rails remained intact, but the route was blocked by a fallen sky bridge stretching across the avenue. Varos looked at the obstruction. We must find another path. There is no other path, Talren said. The sky bridge was hundreds of meters long and built from armored crystal and alloy. Its broken underside burned where power conduits had ruptured. Daniel stopped before it. The missile trembled above him. Elyra climbed down and landed beside him. You cannot go over it. No. You cannot go around it. No. Varos joined them. Then we are finished. Daniel studied the wreckage. His face had gone pale, and one eye flickered with silver light as the exoskeleton rerouted power through his nervous system. Elyra saw the decision form before he spoke. No, she said. Daniel looked at her. You are already near collapse. I'm aware. You cannot carry the missile and move that bridge. I don't need to move it. He glanced toward the shattered avenue beneath the obstruction. I need to go through it. Before anyone could stop him, the armor beneath his skin expanded. Black plates emerged across his chest and arms. The remaining inertia anchors drew closer, forming a tight field around his body and the missile. Daniel lowered his head. Everyone stand back. Varos stared at the enormous barrier. Human, this is madness. Daniel took one heavy step forward. That has never stopped us before. He began to run. The first stride cracked the avenue. The second shattered every window still standing nearby. By the third, the exoskeleton roared like a starship engine. Daniel struck the fallen sky bridge shoulder first. The world vanished in dust and thunder. Armored crystal exploded outward. Metal beams bent around the missile. For one terrifying moment, Elyra saw nothing except smoke and falling debris. Then Daniel emerged from the other side, still upright, still carrying the weapon. He staggered once and looked back through the tunnel he had carved. "See?" he said weakly. Shortcut. The launch platform had been built into the side of the royal citadel, a black crescent of reinforced alloy rising above the burning capital. Its loading rails pointed toward the clouds, but half the guidance towers were dark, and the main cradle hung at an angle where enemy fire had torn through its lower supports. Daniel reached the base of the platform with the missile still balanced across his shoulders, though there was almost nothing human left in the way he moved. The exoskeleton had spread over his back in overlapping plates. Silver light burned beneath his skin. Each breath came with a mechanical rasp, as though his lungs and the machine were arguing over who remained in control. Talren ran to the loading console and connected his scanner. The cradle can still accept the missile, but the alignment motors are dead. General Varos looked up at the damaged rails. Can they be repaired? Not before the flagship fires. Above them, the enormous enemy vessel descended through the cloud layer. Its underside opened in concentric rings, revealing a sphere of red energy that grew brighter with every second. Elyra stared at it. How long? Talren checked the tactical projection. 9 minutes. Daniel gave a short laugh that sounded more painful than amused. Plenty of time. You can barely stand, Elyra said. I'm standing very impressively. His knees buckled as he took another step. The missile shifted. Every guard nearby moved instinctively, though none could have helped if the weapon fell. Daniel locked his arms beneath the frame and forced himself upright again. Blood ran from both corners of his mouth. Elyra moved in front of him. Put it down. There is nowhere safe to put it. Then let the engineers stabilize it. They cannot. Talren did not contradict him. A new alarm sounded. Enemy commandos had entered the lower citadel. Red indicators spread through the platform's access tunnels. Varos drew his blade. I will hold the eastern passage. You will hold nothing alone, Elyra said. She turned to the palace guards. Divide into 2 teams. Protect the platform and the engineers. Varos hesitated. Your Majesty, you must leave. She lifted her rifle. I have spent the entire day being told where I must go. I am beginning to find it repetitive. Daniel looked at her through eyes flickering with machine light. I liked it better when you were behind several walls. I liked it better when you were not leaking. Talren interrupted them. There is another problem. A holographic model of the missile appeared above his wrist. The weapon's internal guidance core was blinking amber. The transport shocks damaged the targeting lattice. It cannot synchronize with the platform. Daniel's jaw tightened. Can you replace it? No. Bypass it? Not with our systems. Elyra saw him look toward the port at the base of his neck. No, she said immediately. Talren followed her gaze. What are you considering? My exoskeleton has a tactical computation core. The engineer's long fingers froze over the controls. You intend to connect yourself to the missile? Only long enough to launch it. Your neural pathways are already overloaded. Daniel smiled faintly. Then they're warmed up. The first enemy commandos emerged from the eastern tunnel. They wore reflective armor that bent light around their bodies, appearing as moving distortions in the smoke. Varos charged before they fully materialized. His energy blade cut through the first soldier's chest, while Elyra and the guards opened fire on the rest. Plasma bolts crossed the platform. One struck the loading console. Talren threw himself aside as sparks erupted around him. The interface is damaged, Daniel looked toward the broken controls, then at the cradle above. "Manual loading," he said. Talren stared. "The cradle is 12 meters high." Daniel stepped beneath the rail assembly. Elyra fired twice, dropping a commando near his flank. "Do not tell me you plan to throw it." "I was going to say place it carefully." "That is somehow worse." The exoskeleton opened fully. Black mechanical limbs unfolded from Daniel's back and locked against the missile. His uniform tore apart beneath expanding armor. The platform groaned as the remaining inertia anchors burned white, transferring the weapon's weight into the citadel foundations. Daniel bent his knees. Then he lifted. The missile rose above his head. Talren stopped moving. Even Varos glanced back from the fighting. Daniel took one step onto the damaged loading ramp. The alloy folded beneath his boot. He took another. His artificial support stabbed into the rail, pulling him upward while he carried the weapon toward the cradle. The enemy flagship's weapon continued charging. 7 minutes. 6. Elyra fought her way closer to the loading controls. "Tell me what to do." Talren pointed toward the shattered console. "The missile must be locked into the upper clamps. Then the launch reactor must be ignited manually." "And Daniel?" The engineer said nothing. She looked up. Daniel reached the cradle and pushed the missile into the damaged rails. The clamps closed around it with a thunderous impact. For one moment, he remained hanging beneath the weapon, suspended by the metallic limbs extending from his spine. Then the exoskeleton failed. The silver lights across his body went dark. Daniel fell. Elyra dropped her rifle and ran. She caught one of his arms, but his weight pulled them both to the platform. Varos seized his other shoulder and helped drag him away from the launch rail. Daniel's eyes opened weakly. "Did we park it straight?" Elyra knelt beside him. "You fell 12 meters. "That is not an answer." Talren checked the clamps. "The missile is secured." Daniel gave a slow nod. "Good." Above them, the enemy weapon reached full brightness. Talren looked toward the dead guidance console. "We still cannot launch." Daniel reached for the port in his neck. Elyra caught his hand. "If you connect to that missile, will you survive?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Probably not." The humor had finally left his voice. The Queen's long ears lowered as the battlefield thundered around them. Then she removed the neural crown from her own head, pulled free its royal command crystal, and pressed it into Talren's hands. "Combine this with his system." Talren stared. "Your Majesty, the crown is linked to the planetary defense network." "Exactly." Daniel understood first. "You want to split the neural load. Between you, me, and the city. That is a terrible plan." Elyra connected the crown's silver tendrils to the port at his neck. "You are the one who ran through a bridge." The damaged platform filled with light. Across the capital, dormant power lines awakened. Palace towers, buried reactors, defense relays, and even civilian energy grids answered the Queen's command signal. Their power flowed into Daniel's exoskeleton, through his nervous system, and into the missile guidance core. He arched against the floor as the connection took hold. Elyra gripped his hand while stars, targeting coordinates, and enemy formations flooded both their minds. The missile reactor ignited. Daniel's voice reached her through the neural link, faint but unmistakably amused. "Next time," he said, "we use the elevator." The neural link opened the sky inside Elyra's mind. For one breath, she was no longer kneeling on the damaged launch platform. She was everywhere the defense network still touched. She felt power surging through buried conduits beneath the capital, tasted static from broken satellites, and saw the enemy fleet through the blind electronic eyes of shattered orbital stations. Daniel was there with her, not as a voice beside her, but as a presence threaded through the system, scarred, exhausted, and holding together more pain than any living mind should have endured. The missile waited above them. Its reactor burned like a captive sun. Talren worked at the ruined console, while royal command symbols spun around his hands. Guidance alignment at 60%. "Not enough," Daniel said through the link. Elyra felt his exoskeleton stripping power from failing systems. Streetlights died across the western districts. Palace shields vanished. Medical generators flickered, then stabilized as Daniel deliberately excluded them. Even at the edge of death, he was choosing what not to sacrifice. The Queen understood then that his strength had never been the machine. Enemy weapon discharge in 40 seconds, Talren warned. The flagship's planet-killing core expanded above the clouds, a red sphere large enough to stain the entire sky. Around it, escort vessels formed a defensive wall. Daniel pushed targeting data into the missile. The system rejected it. The weapon had been designed to obey alien neural patterns, not a human mind fused with Earth machinery. Warning symbols flooded their shared vision. Compatibility failure, Talren said. The missile cannot interpret him. Then it will interpret us, Elyra replied. She opened the Royal Command Crystal completely. Memories poured into the network. The palace gardens beneath silver rain, her father placing the crown upon her head, children laughing in the market, soldiers swearing loyalty beneath the moons. Daniel recoiled as the weight of an entire civilization entered him. Then his memories answered. Elyra saw red dust beneath a Martian sky, a ruined Earth colony. A younger Daniel trapped beneath collapsed armor while surgeons offered him survival at the cost of becoming something no one had attempted before. She felt the moment he agreed. She felt years of strangers looking at him as a weapon before looking at him as a man. He had joked because silence left too much room for those memories. Elyra tightened her grip on his hand. "You are not alone inside this machine," she told him. For the first time since she had met him, Daniel did not hide behind humor. "I know," he said. The guidance lattice turned green. Talren struck the final command. "Launch!" The missile rose. The damaged rails exploded beneath it as the engine ignited. A column of white fire tore upward through the smoke, shaking the citadel to its foundations. The weapon crossed the capital in seconds, climbing toward the enemy formation, while defensive ships moved to intercept it. Daniel entered their systems through the missile's targeting core. The alien escorts fired. The missile changed course before their weapons reached it. It twisted through plasma streams, split its outer casing, and released dozens of false signatures. Enemy vessels scattered after phantom targets, while the true warhead accelerated directly toward the flagship. The planet-killing beam fired. Red light descended through the clouds. For a terrible instant, missile and beam met above the capital. Then Daniel redirected the warhead into the center of the energy stream. The sky became white. Elyra heard nothing. The neural link filled with silence so complete that she thought the world had ended. A shockwave rolled across the atmosphere. Clouds fled outward in a perfect circle. The enemy beam collapsed, reversed through its own focusing system, and drove the missile's fusion energy into the flagship. The great vessel broke apart from within. Cracks of golden light spread across its dark hull. One section folded into another. Then the ship vanished in an explosion that illuminated the planet's moons. Without their command vessel, the remaining enemy ships fled toward hyperspace. Several failed to escape before Varos's surviving defense batteries found them. The network dimmed. Elyra fell back onto the platform as the command crystal disconnected. Daniel lay motionless beside her. "Daniel." No answer. Talren rushed forward with his scanner. Its display remained dark for several seconds. Then a faint pulse appeared. "He is alive." The words moved through the survivors faster than any command signal. Guards lowered their weapons. Engineers laughed. Varos sat heavily against the broken console and covered all four eyes with one hand. Daniel woke 3 days later beneath the medical lights of the Royal Infirmary. Most of the exoskeleton had gone silent. The black plates had withdrawn beneath his skin, and the silver glow along his veins was gone. Elyra sat beside the window wearing no crown, her long ears lifting when his eyes opened. "Did we win?" he asked. "Yes." "Did the missile hit?" "Yes." "Did I damage the launcher?" She looked at him without expression. "There is no launcher." Daniel considered this. "Then technically, no repair is required." Elyra laughed before she could stop herself. Weeks later, the capital gathered beneath the restored palace dome. Daniel stood before thousands wearing a simple dark uniform, supported by a walking brace rather than hidden machinery. He moved more slowly now. The exoskeleton would never again reach its former strength, but he no longer seemed diminished by that truth. Queen Elyra placed the highest royal medal against his chest. "You carried the last hope of this world when no one else could," she said. "But more importantly, you taught us that humanity's greatest technology is not built from metal. It is the refusal to abandon those standing beneath the same sky." Daniel looked across the crowd. Alien soldiers, engineers, children, and civilians watched him not with fear, but gratitude. For once, he allowed the silence to remain. Then he leaned toward Elyra. "Next time your planet is attacked," he whispered, "I would appreciate a smaller missile." Her laughter carried across the square, and the people joined her. Above them, new defense ships built from human and alien technology entered orbit together, marking the beginning of an alliance neither civilization had imagined before the day. One soldier walked through a burning city with 940 tons on his shoulders.